You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say will be used against you.
You are not listening.
I want your job to be taken from you.
A protest has turned violent in California, Berkeley.
This is why we're fighting for the soul of America.
You should be able to share ideas without fear of being fired from your job or shouted down.
You are not to be heard. This is one of the few things one could say we have no precedent for in the United States.
You have the right to remain silent.
The only way we separate the good ideas from the bad ideas is to be free to say whatever we want about them.
Anything you say will be used against you.
Hello and welcome to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast. I'm your host Matthew Pejkovic and this is episode 267. Out now in theatres across the US is No Safe Spaces, a documentary that delves into the widespread and incredibly troubling problem of restrictions on free speech, identity politics, and ideological warfare in college campuses across the United States. A sober and frightening look at how places of education and exploration have become a hotbed for the suppression of free speech. No Safe Spaces also proves to be an entertaining watch that utilises the strengths of its figureheads Adam Carolla and Denis Prager to charming and direct effect. Joining me now is the director of No Safe Spaces, Justin Falk. Justin, I thank you very much for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
So to me, this documentary is a film that had to happen. I mean, these events have been building up for quite some time now. They've been very well documented across traditional and digital media. And I was just wondering, Justin, on your end, how did you get involved with the process of this documentary? Did you feel compelled to add your voice as a filmmaker to the debate surrounding these issues?
Well, you are correct. This has been percolating for some time. Our timing of the film is fortuitous, not in a good way, not in the sense of these things happening, but in the sense that we were making this film at this time. We started out a little bit more broad just in terms of making a film about what young people think, and we really saw this issue of suppression of speech and just this dangerous identity politics that was taking place around the country, popping up just about everywhere. And so it really focused our story as we were making it to really focus on these issues and show people what's really going on. I think a lot of people really don't know the extent of this problem. They hear about it a little bit offhand with stories that pop up here and there, and they just kind of disregard it as, oh, that's just something happening over on college campuses somewhere, with crazy kids. Kids are always going to be crazy. They're always going to be pushing back and doing things. But I think what we're seeing here is very different. We're seeing a suppression of speech, a suppression of ideas that we've never really seen before in America. And also, I should add, this is not just on college campuses. This has spread everywhere in society. It may have, in some ways, started on college campuses, but it is now everywhere in our culture. We see it with comedians being shut down. We see it, people in their places of work being fired for having opinions that didn't meet the dogma of those around them. And so this is a big problem, and our film really serves to try to open people's eyes and see this problem for what it is.
And I have to add as well, it's not only an American issue, because here in Australia we have a lot of incidences and debates surrounding the same things that your film is talking about as well. So it's very much a global, especially in the Western world, issue as well.
Certainly, absolutely. Yeah, we focused our efforts on the States, and mostly, focusing on the fact of how important free speech has been in this country. But free speech is has to do with freedom, and any civilized country around the world that values freedom, the things in this film would be applicable to.
The figureheads of this film are Adam Carolla and Denis Prager. I mean, you got two very different people here. They come from different philosophical difference regarding politics and religion, but when you put them together, they work surprisingly well. And I think that's really a benefit to the film, because if you take one of them away, the film itself changes just so much. I mean, if it was just Adam, it could have been more comedic. If it was just Denis, it could have been just much more academic in its way. So the mix together just works surprisingly well. What do you think is it about them two as a partnership that works so well, despite the obvious differences between the two, which they also reference to multiple times in the documentary.
Well, we have an interesting buddy movie here, and as you mentioned, they're very different. They have very different backgrounds, very different upbringings. They're very different people. Dennis brings a tremendous amount of insight. He's a very wise person and has an incredible amount of insight on all kinds of topics that have to do with politics and religion and relationships and everything else and everything in between. Adam has always been in my opinion, one of the funniest people in this country. I mean, he's been a great comedian for a number of years, but he's also very insightful. And we sort of have this double-edged sword. We have this combo of two people that can kind of come at an issue from a couple different ways. We can get people laughing first, and that tends to open people up to arguments and ideas if you can get the comedy injected there. And so that's why we have Adam sort of giving us some laughs along the way, and then we have Denis coming along with some very, very big insights. And so the two working together has been really amazing. A lot of the way this film came together was the fact that these two had become friends and were doing live events together, speaking events occasionally. And that's sort of the genesis of this film. That's how things came together, was their relationship. And we just felt like they had a lot to say on this subject. Obviously, both of them make their living by speaking and telling, debating the issues and talking about ideas. So they're very relevant to the story. And of course, they got shut down too early in our story, which is an interesting part of it. They actually became the story themselves.
Yep, definitely. When it comes to things like referencing the film's title, safe spaces, trigger warnings, universities implementing new speech codes, I'm just really curious, is it the institutions, is it the parents, is it the teachers, or is it the students themselves who really brought this stuff along? I mean, it's really kind of interesting just seeing the evolution of this stuff, because to me it just seems like this stuff just came out of nowhere and really just had a really tight grip not only on college life but outside of that as well. Where does it all kind of stem from, in your opinion, having looked at these subjects and talked about it in length?
Yeah, it's hard to diagnose this down to one root cause. I don't think there is one root cause. I think it is a combination of things that have gotten us to where we are today in an alarming fashion. Obviously, people talk a lot about helicopter parenting and how we have this generation of young people that are very, very fragile and don't want to hear ideas that they disagree with. We also have seen how things have transpired on the campus for a number of years in terms of an ideological bent that's been very one-sided and very, I guess you could just call it indoctrination, very, very focused on teaching people what they believe to be the right way of thinking instead of being open to a lot of different ideas. So you can kind of combo a lot of these different, I think, causes together to see how we got where we are. The one thing that I think is the most alarming is, in the past, young people have always been the ones to be supportive of freedom of speech. Yeah. And that's, I think, the dangerous thing that we're facing today is a lot of these young people are the ones that are shouting for people to be shut down and for voices not to be heard. And so this is kind of the unprecedented part of what we're dealing with right now. In the past, it was the administrations that would shut people down or not allow certain types of speech. But now the issue's very different, and it's actually the young people. And so that's the alarming thing that we're facing today.
Do you think also that 9/11 had a part to do with that as well? Because I know it's a thing that people say that everything changed after 9/11. Yeah. And I think what's really unique about that very tragic day is that for a brief moment after that, it seemed everyone, no matter who you were, what your ideological, political, religious difference was, you were together for a brief moment, especially like looking from us in Australia, just looking at the United States, it really seemed that way. There was a united front there. But then as soon as that happened, there was like clear fault lines and ideological splits, and then social media came in and everything else. The whole 9/11 theory in regards to where the differences really started to creep in and people became more in regards to activists, more activists kind of spurn from that. Do you reckon that's a turning point there in recent American history in regards to these issues?
Yeah, I think there is a connection. I don't know about the activism part of it, but I do think that there's a part of this that has to do with the whole safety and protection idea, and people want to be safe and protected. And 9/11 was unsettling for everybody. It was a moment when everybody was just blindsided in a moment, in a time when people felt that nothing was safe anymore. And I think people were looking for answers, or looking for a way to ensure that things like this wouldn't happen again. And our film deals a lot with safety and protection, and what's human nature in all of us of wanting to be safe, wanting to be protected, versus this idea of liberty. And the two they pull against each other quite a bit. And actually, Dennis Prager talks about this in the film, that people don't necessarily yearn to be free. They learn to be protected. They learn to be safe and taken care of. I think 9/11 was very unsettling for a lot of people, when people were looking for answers to say, hey, how do we protect ourselves? And Jordan Peterson, at one part in our film, talks about this and says, the best thing to do is not to necessarily just cover people in protection, as if you could possibly figure out a way to ensure that, but actually to make them strong. And so in our film, no safe spaces. There are no safe spaces when it comes to ideas, and in life there really are no safe spaces. But the idea is, as human beings, can we be strong? Can we learn from each other? Can we debate ideas? Can we face the dangers, the real dangers that are in society, and do so in an open way without giving up our liberties? And so I think there is a connection there when it comes to 9/11, but I think it has a lot to do more with safety and protection, and how it's sort of molded these young people who have never really known a time other than post 9/11.
Yep, yeah, definitely. Your film delves into many different events that kind of shape the narrative that you're putting forward. The Lindsay Shepard case, the Brett Weinstein case, the events that led to the whole Jordan Peterson phenomenon. How familiar were you with a lot of these cases going into the project? And if you were familiar with them, afterwards, was there anything about these cases that you did not know about beforehand that really kind of left you surprised and perhaps even shocked afterwards?
Well, I think it's a great question, and thanks for asking it, because I had heard of these incidents. I think a lot of us that were following these issues would see these things pop up, and we'd sort of marvel at them from afar. When I heard about the Lindsay Shepard incident, I heard the audio recording that she had recorded, and it was startling to me, and it really made us want to pursue this story. And the same thing with the incident at Evergreen State College with Brett Weinstein and his wife Heather. Seeing the reports and seeing the behavior of some of these students and what was going on was really shocking. But it wasn't until we got there and started talking to them that the full gravity of this hit us. I mean, it kind of seemed at first to be kind of laughable and silly. But once we dug into it, once we met these people, once we started to unravel this story, it was just downright shocking, the depths of this, and how dark it is, and how oppressive it is, and these things that happen to these people. And by the way, Lindsay Shepard, Brett Weinstein, these are not conservatives. These are not people that are being shut down because they are on the right, or that they're conservative, too conservative, in a very liberal place or a leftist place. These are leftists. These are liberals that have been shut down. And so it was just fascinating to see what happens when you do just the one wrong thing, and they will come and try to basically eliminate you. Very startling. And so it wasn't until we really began to uncover the story that we realized how deep this stuff went, how dark the philosophy behind it was. And we hope that, again, like I mentioned earlier, we really hope that telling these stories is a true wake-up call to people.
Something that really startles me watching the movie, and we've had similar incidences here in Australia as well, is the aggression. The kind of like very scary scenes of mob rule, violence, masked as protest, and watching the footage of, say, the Milo riots at Berkeley, and the whole Antifa thing as well. Like I said, we've had that stuff here as well in Australia, at campuses and at protests as well. You covered some of these events. You guys were on the ground there, especially in regards to Ben Shapiro's speech at Berkeley, and it just seemed like there was like this really kind of palpable build-up that something was going to happen. Evidently, nothing did. I think a lot of people had wiser heads after the whole Milo incident. But when you were there on the ground, when you're covering these events, what's it like to be there at that time? Was there fear in the air, or was it a case of hopefully people would just calm down and see that once Ben starts talking and the whole thing is over, there was nothing to be afraid of as well? And it's funny because at the end of his speech, he was pretty much like, look, it's finished, nothing happened, the world didn't burn, it's all good, nothing happened, you guys need to calm down a bit. Is that something that you kind of saw as well when you were down there covering these events?
Yeah, the Ben Shapiro speech at Berkeley was fascinating, and I got to travel with Ben. Our team got to travel with Ben to that event. Now, of course, the Milo riot had happened 6 or 8 months prior to this event. I think the difference between those two events is the police did not do anything to step in and prevent damage and violence during the Milo event. During the Ben event, they did. They basically realized they didn't want to repeat performance here. And I think it did prevent a lot of destruction and violence and things like that just by their mere presence.
Yep.
There was a lot of tension in the air. There was a lot of tension. And there were a number of arrests, and there was a little bit of violence. There was one girl that got assaulted and got hurt very badly during the Ben Shapiro, the lead up to that, outside the event. And so I think the police came in full force to make sure that things didn't get out of hand. I do think it was effective, and especially in the sense of allowing him to talk. But the strange thing for me as a filmmaker is here I was on an American, very prestigious United States college campus, and it felt like we were traveling into the Iraqi green zone with the amount of security and the cement barricades and the way they would wind us around and brought us down into the basement of the building before we actually even emerged from the vehicle. So it was a strange thing to be happening, on a college campus in the United States for it to feel that way. We had police in riot gear. It was astounding, and just simply for a guy to give a simple speech. Now, I will add one little interesting thing here. Ben Shapiro had been at Berkeley the year prior, and there was basically nothing. I mean, he had maybe one bodyguard with him, and so something changed during that time. And and I asked Ben at one point, I'm like, "What do you think of all this? I mean, all these people basically going crazy over you." And he says, this isn't about me at all. This is just the time we're living in. It could have been anybody. But like I said, he had been there a year before with no incident at all, and given a speech. And here he was a year later, and it required $600,000 worth of security just for him to come and give a simple speech to people that wanted to hear what he had to say. And so something definitely changed in that time, and that's where we are today. And thank goodness the police actually did their job that day and really made sure that the peace was kept. But it was unsettling to think that would happen on a U.S. college campus. They would need that kind of security.
I, of course, watched this film on screen. This film is showing in cinemas, though, in the States. And what I really found really surprising in a really good way in regards to watching your movie is the cinematic aspect of it. I mean, you guys did come in with a small budget. A lot of it was crowdfunded. But the film is very impressive in look. And I think that's really what you bring to the table in regards to as a filmmaker that really worked there. When you so you have the material, you have everything in front of you, you have to craft a movie now. What was your approach to how you wanted this film to be delivered? For example, the use of animated segments, was that something that was talked about before? Is that something that you brought to the table that you knew that was a really kind of cool way to bring across some of the ideas in the film?
Well, first of all, thank you for that. I really appreciate that you mentioned that, and we did work hard to give this film a level of cinema that people would actually want to go to a movie theater and pay for, $15 or whatever. What do you call it down there? Do you call it quid, or is that British?
No, that's British, and it is British. And here we will pay maybe for a cinema ticket anywhere between 18 to like 20 something bucks down here as well.
Okay, so you call it bucks. Okay, so we're united around the word bucks. So for somebody to come and pay that kind of money to watch a movie, they're going to want a certain level of cinematic experience, and not just to make a rather than just a documentary with talking heads that people watch on Netflix or somewhere else. We really knew that we needed to raise the bar when it came to the cinema value, and all along we were looking for opportunities to do that. So that's why we added some animated sequences. That's why we have reenactments and a number of other things to basically bring people along on the journey. And ultimately, it tells a better story. It allows people to see the issue from a number of different ways. We use some humor, and humor always opens people up and puts, allows people to put their guard down a little bit. So that's why we did this. We wanted to break it up. We wanted to keep the story moving along and make it entertaining. And one way to do that was to add these things to make it more cinematic. So I appreciate you mentioned that, and we did work hard on that. Ultimately, we had so much material to work with, and there's a lot of hard decisions that have to be made. There's the term you have to kill some babies, and it's a weird term, but basically you have to get rid of things in the edit that you've really fallen in love with, and that's a hard process to go through. But we went through it. I mean, we've made this film over the course of 2.5 years, and so it was always an editing and refining process along the way. And ultimately, at the end of it, I think we told the best possible story that we could with what we had. But it was definitely, it took a lot of collaboration out of a great team. And one of the reasons that it looks so good and is so entertaining is because I got to work with such a great group of collaborators, whether it's on the storytelling side of it, and figuring out the story, or even just the crew, the people that we used to shoot the movie, really talented people. So this film is the result of a collaboration of many, many people, and I think that's what gives it its cinematic quality on screen.
Is there? I feel that there's potential for further, say, sequels or stories, whether they be in cinema or online or TV serial or what have you, in regards to a lot of the issues brought up in the film. For example, you guys talk about, outside of the whole issue revolving college campuses, you also talk a bit about social media. I think you can make a whole movie about that. You can talk about comedy, state of comedy these days. You can make a whole thing about that. You can make a whole thing about, say, the entertainment industry and their part in the whole kind of almost propagandizing of some of these ideas as well. Is there talks any way whatsoever of maybe expanding the No Safe Spaces universe, if you will, to go do deep dives into different subjects revolving these issues and presenting them in that way?
Well, there's always been talks about things like that, of that nature. We're going to see where this all leads us. We did want this movie to sort of stand on its own as a very important cultural marker, and for people to reference back to it and say, refer to it when it comes to a lot of these issues we're facing in our society today. We're certainly open to that. We're certainly open to exploring more. In our film, in this particular film, we do touch on a few things, and I know, in a 90-minute film, you can only do so much, and so we do touch on things like tech and social media and basically what's unfolding in society at large. And it would be nice for somebody to come along, whether it's us or anybody else, to do a deep dive into this sort of thing. But I think the purpose of this film was to sound the initial alarm and, I guess, kick the door in on these issues and really make people aware of them. And where we go from here, we'll see. Obviously, we need the film to do well at the box office. That's usually what tends to lead to more, follow-ups and things like that. If a film does well at the box office, we're really hoping for that. But we'll see where it goes. Our goal right now is to make this film as successful as we can make it and have as many people see it as possible. And then we'll see where the discussion goes from there.
You guys did open up in a limited capacity. Early receipts have been very encouraging, and that's why you are now expanding. How does it feel to be able to have that option now that you can go out into further territories and have your films presented in different places in the States?
Well, it feels great. You go into a box and make a movie for like 2.5 years, 3 years, and you hope you're making something good, and you hope people will respond to it. And our plan, because of, you mentioned earlier, our limited budget, the fact that we did crowdfund this movie, which was great. This movie would not have been made without people, supporters, giving us small donations. 20, 50 bucks to allow us to have the budget that we had to go out and make this. So we've had the limited release was our strategy to get it out there, see if we could do well, and then if it had the support, we could expand to more and more places. And we were able to do that. We had a good release in Phoenix and San Diego and Denver and a few other places. And there seems to be a lot of interest and demand for this movie, which is why we're expanding nationwide this weekend, actually it opens today, but the weekend of December 6th, all across the country in different markets. And we're really hoping that momentum continues. But yeah, it's very exciting that we actually have this opportunity to do this, because it is what we're hoping for and planning for. But ultimately, we're free market guys. The market will determine what will happen with this film, and we're just happy that it's out there and available right now for people to see.
Any plans at the moment in regards to expanding outside of North America? I know a lot of people in Australia, for example, will love to check this film out.
Absolutely, yeah. We definitely, there's a lot of things that we want to do with this film, including international release in different areas. I think there'll be probably more demand for it in a place like Australia and Canada and some others than others, but we definitely plan on doing that. That's sort of the next step of things. Another thing we'd like to do is an actual college campus tour with the film. So we'll be working on that. That'll probably follow up later, maybe possibly in the spring. And we'd like to explore a lot of different options for people to see the film, not just in the United States movie theaters.
Well, that's so excellent to hear. And for everyone out there, especially my listeners in the US, No Safe Spaces expanding now across the country. Go find out where your local cinema is. You can go to nosafespaces.com, and that's got all types of info on there in regards to which cities and which cinemas will be showing the film. And also, I can highly recommend the Facebook page for No Safe Spaces. Justin and I were talking off air before about how I found a lot of the information regarding the film and followed the progress of the making of the film through that Facebook page. Is very well run, updated almost pretty much seems like every half day. There's a lot of information there going out, so I can recommend that as well. Justin, folk, I thank you very much for talking to me today. Congratulations to you on the documentary. I really do think the subject in this film and the film itself is so very important in the overall debate surrounding these issues. So I thank you very much for directing the film, and thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much, Matt. And just to reiterate the urgency is we're coming out between Frozen and Star Wars, and so there's this small window that we live in. So we really hope people make it out to the theater this weekend to see it and support the film, because we're going up against a bunch of juggernauts. But if we can get word of mouth going and get people out to the theater, we can do well. We can kind of send a shockwave around the country. So please make it out if you can. Like you mentioned, nosafespaces.com. There's a link for theaters. You can find out where it's playing, and you can buy tickets. So thanks so much for having me, Matt. I really appreciate it. And thank you.